What do you make of the recent moves by the EU? They seem to be looking to backfill any potential gaps if the U.S. backs off of providing military resources. And then the German had said, Friedrich Merz indicated that, well, on one day they were going to provide the Taurus cruise missile systems, and then the next day he said, well, that's not the case. But what do you make of EU moves lately?
Well, I think European countries realize that if Ukraine fails, um, that they're next. I mean, that Putin has been very open about, he has aspirations beyond Ukraine. And they also know that if Ukraine fails, millions more Ukrainian refugees will be heading west into Poland, Germany, Romania, and other parts of Europe. So there's a economic problem as well as the security problem. So I think they're recognizing, I think they've come to the conclusion, frankly, that our administration is not going to actually do anything of substance. And therefore, this has been put completely in their lap. And that's why you've got UK and France and now Germany much more forward leaning on support to Ukraine. Now, they should have been doing this all along, but the fact is they are stepping up to do it now. Um, the new Bundeskanzler, Mr. Merz, indicated that he's not going to talk publicly about what they provide and don't provide anymore, which I think is probably smart. We should quit advertising. Okay, we just sent 10 more, whatever. And they are going to invest a lot of money in Ukrainian defense industry, particularly on helping Ukrainians develop their own long-range precision strike capability. So whatever this aid looks like, this is a positive thing that I think Europeans know they have to do it for their own security. This is not charity for Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mertz. Yeah, you made a really good point there. He did say after there was a bit of a kerfuffle over, will they, won't they provide the Taurus? Then he commented that Germany is going to do everything possible to help Ukraine develop their own capabilities internally to produce long-range missile systems. What's the timeline on something like that? That would seem to imply that there is no ceasefire in the works, that there is no truce down the road, that at least the EU is looking at this and thinking this is a longer term, even though it's been 3 years already.
Well, once again, you've put your finger on an important point. The Ukrainians, by the way, I don't think any serious people will show up in Istanbul from Ukraine on Monday. They know Russia better than we ever will, and they know that the Russians actually have zero interest in a real set of negotiations. And of course, Ukrainians also know that the Russians cannot be trusted, will never live up to any agreement. That's why they've insisted there has to be a ceasefire before you can get to real negotiations. So all the talking, everything that's been going on so far, that's just to try and get to a ceasefire of some sort. And the Russians have made it clear they will not do a ceasefire until they get some kind of deal in place. Well, that's the exact opposite side of this. And so I think people are realizing this is going to go on a lot longer. Um, I do anticipate, at least what I read today, that what the German government is planning on doing, that there will be output, let's say, before the end of this year. Some new capabilities that are perhaps are already in the works, but this economic boost from Germany and maybe even some technology boosts. And of course, that's why the Russians immediately threatened Germany. They said, well, obviously the Ukrainians can't do this without Germany. So if they do, then we'll have to strike Berlin. That's a big, giant, fat, empty threat, but it has worked in the past, these kinds of threats.
What do you think about former Russian President Medvedev's comments talking about World War III the other day?
Well, another drunken stupor by Medvedev, who they trot out about every 2 weeks to threaten nuclear war and all that, because he knows that, and frankly, during the Biden administration was very susceptible to these threats of nuclear war, as were several European countries, particularly Germany. Now you've got new leadership in Germany that is not shaken by this, and I I imagine that the Trump White House also is not moved by the nuclear threats.
Yeah, you're right. Nobody loves to rattle the nuclear saber more than Dmitry Medvedev. He kind of does it on a regular basis. And it is interesting because now they've, again, if you're thinking about, okay, well, if we had really solid intel sources, we could understand the plans and intentions and motivations of Putin and his increasingly shrinking inner circle. But you would have to assume that they made that realization, that they said, okay, look, this type of talk isn't impacting this current U.S. administration. It doesn't seem to be impacting the EU the way that it did in the past. With the U.S. and others saying, yes, we've given a green light to using our systems to strike further into Russia, and the Germans obviously on board with that now in some fashion. At some point, you have to ask yourself, what would it take? And I guess, once again, we started with asking you to speculate. I guess I'm kind of wrapping up with asking you to speculate. But a two-part question. What would it take to get Putin to actually sit down at the table, in your opinion? And what do you think this conflict looks like by the time the end of the year rolls around?
So I think he will only sit down when he's forced to, when he realizes they are either going to lose or there's no way that they can win. His economy is being propped up right now. It's on somebody called it a sugar high of defense investment, which is not a sustainable way to do it. And so if we would go after their oil and gas industry in such a way so that they could not export to India and China, then they would not be able to pay for what they're doing. So the economic pressure would be enormous. And I think that kind of pressure is what it's really going to take, using our economic power. That's us working with Europe, working with the Saudis and others, so you can manipulate the market and severely damage the Russian side. I think it's only going to be that, or with a commitment by the United States and European countries. We're going to help Ukraine win. Not this, we're with you for as long as it takes BS, but we're going to help them win. And here you go. We're putting as many ATACMS, javelins, artillery, everything you could possibly use. It's coming. Then I think Putin would realize, and the people around him would realize, okay, we got to get out of here somehow. I think that's the only way. What does it look like a year from now? Obviously, it depends on what the U.S. does and on what Europe does. I think if nothing changes, I think we'll be about where we are right now come December.
There's a cheery thought. Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.